Ugochukwu, also known as Ugo Dre, is the founder of Nairametrics, a leading financial information and content creation company based in Lagos. He's also a fellow of the Chartered Accountant of Nigeria with over 20 years experience in corporate finance, treasury, financial management, corporate strategy, marketing, and corporate governance. Ugo believes in multitasking and maintaining a balance between pursuing a career as well as self-interest goals. As a trained finance expert, he has a special interest in personal finance, investing, financial analysis, and supports this passion through Nairametrics. Now, you would wonder, what is Ugo Dre doing here? After all, it's a digital marketing bootcamp, right? Hello, is there a way to run a business without considering the economy? You'd be operating in your own world, if you ask me. So we thought, before we even go deeper into talking about branding and communications and digitalization and technology, let us try to get an outlook of what our economy is saying for 2023. No better person in Nigeria to take this class than Mr. Ugo Dre. Please join us.
All right, so I prepared it. It's a very long slide, but I'll try as much as possible to flip through and just focus on some of the key things. Incidentally, this is going to be my very first presentation of my economic outlook for 2023. Yeah. So what you're about to see is what I typically present for some board meetings, ESCOs of very serious organizations. And you guys are likely going to be the first to see this. If I'm going too fast, please slow me down. If the English or the grammar is getting too big, please let me know. But presentation is basically trends. Have you accessed that? Have you accessed it? So it's basically it's a slightly heavy document. You can open it like as an online version. Anyway, so it's my trend for 2023, and I think that as a business owner. Oh, by the way, I think there are people online as well. Yes. All right, hi online people. So you always have to understand that business around the world is not just about number 65 every morning job. This is not where this business starts and ends. We are in a very global village, like they say. So you'll be shocked how a decision in South Korea, just one decision in South Korea, made by South Korean parliament, they just decide one day to just enact one law, will just turn around the fortunes of this business here. Incredible, but we've seen it happen. And that's because the world is such a very small place now. And as business owners or people who are into digital transformation, you need to understand the power of globalization and how you can essentially fit that into your business model. And so today I'm just going to take you through trends, and we will talk about some economic issues that affect all of us, by the way. We'll talk about inflation, we'll talk about exchange rates. Do you guys want to know what my prediction is for the exchange rate? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about exchange rates. We'll talk about Japan as well. We're going to touch on that. We'll talk about politics. We'll talk about the war in Ukraine as well. So we're going to touch on a lot of those things. I have how many minutes?
30 minutes now.
30 minutes. So it's a loss now, bye.
So that you can ask one or two questions.
All right. So it's a rich slide. So I'll try and flip through it. All right. So next slide, please. All right. So this is a recap of 2022. I think a lot of us are familiar with all of this, right? So on this side is top line is mostly social political issues. You saw the way Russia and Ukraine just changed everything around the world. All the plans that people had in January, Russia and Ukraine happened in February and upended everything. even the best economics in the world all came with their own plans and projections for what will happen. And Russia and Ukraine essentially torpedoed all of it. COVID-19 kind of ended in 2022, but I think, of course, last year was dominated by primary elections for 2023 elections. This time last year, a lot of us were wondering who Buhari was going to back, isn't it? We're all thinking, who really back? So the rumor is this other guy, but at the end of the day, Baba did not back anyone. And so we saw how that turned out. So these are basically key things that dominate 2022. Anything? Did I miss anything here? Sure, like, look at it. Even skits. Did you guys notice last year was huge for skits? Yeah, skits economy was huge last year. A lot of people really, like, you could see the creativity of Nigerians last year with skits. And guess what? That's actually a threat to a lot of businesses. Because now, if you're, a digital media company and your job is to maybe create nice digital video ads for companies, the skit guys will just be in their room and just create some kind of stuff, and that's it. I know a friend who used to work with us, and he used to do the skits where it changes into different things, clothes. I know you've probably seen it. Yeah. He 2-3 years ago, I remember when he was celebrating 10,000 followers, but now he does skits for companies. He resigned from work colleagues. He resigned and does his own thing. So that was the rise of the skits. And of course, Nigerian music, I think last year was like their best year ever. I don't know if you all agree. Like you couldn't even, so Ashake from Nigeria, right? So imagine a country where Ashake dominated the entire Nigeria. But globally, it was who? It was Keith Daniel, it was Burna Boy, it was Whiskey, it was Rema, it was Thames. They weren't even like the top guys here. But outside Nigeria, you're going into strange countries and they are playing Rema music. And then you see a lot of collabs. So those were all trends. So you gotta always understand the trends going on around your space and figure out how that affects your business. Don't just sit down and think that these things don't concern your business. So when you're having your monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, you guys should always have trends as one of those things in your agenda. What are trends, guys? Let's talk about trends. What's going on? How does that affect us? Because it does, even if you don't. So let's move to the Think Proper. Next slide. All right, next slide. So we'll talk about inflation. So inflation is, let's keep going. Inflation is an evil. And the reason why I start with inflation is that is what I think is going to be the theme for this world. Every single thing that you're planning this year, make sure that inflation is at the center of it. Inflation is basically the rising cost of goods and services. So globally around the world, we're facing a high inflationary environment. And that was caused by COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine war, essentially, and then central banks around the world that pumped in a lot of money in 2020. So I'm sure a lot of you that are in digital space, 2020 was probably one of your best years because a lot of people were at home, eyeballs were focused on your mobile phones, less distractions. So that was actually why 2022 was good for a lot of content creators because 2020 and 2021 gave them enough time to really invest in their creativity, and then they were now able to gobble up a lot of users online because people got more familiar with online. Now, my mother, who I've been trying to teach how to use mobile phones for years, now is telling me some tips in WhatsApp and some things in Opera Mini and all these other things that she used to get her news. So now they've now realized that they can even watch church programs on their phones. So it sort of upended everything. So for bringing it down to inflation, every single thing is going to be expensive this year. Everything. So when you're planning your year, what I'm telling people is that if you have money, let's assume that you want to buy new ACs. You plan to move to a new office. You're planning to move to a new office. You have the cash. Please buy the ACs down and keep in the store. Don't wait till July. Don't wait till, whatever move now. Don't wait. Because what we've observed is that the investment you make might not be able to cover the inflation that would happen within that period. Because prices are like almost doubling. So it's going to be a huge theme. Some of the things that you import, some of the costs you pay for, they are going to go up.
if you're into digital creating and you are buying, you have to pay for subscription for all these things you subscribe online, they're likely going to go up. So you also have to sit down with your accountant, if that's not one thing you do, or maybe with yourself, you're self-employed, and look at your budget and start to ask yourself, what are the nice to haves? Remove them. Focus on the things that you really need that actually drive your business, because it's going to be a high inflationary environment next year. Next. Okay, so I also have some of my outlook. Next slide. Next slide. Now, so exchange rate. Keep going. A lot has happened in 2000 and over the last 3 years. So just to give you guys a background, because people keep asking me, why is inflation so high? I'm sorry, why is the exchange rate always depreciating? I was with a friend a couple of days ago and he was telling me how he was doing some numbers and it was clear to him that investing in Nigeria or having Naira investments just don't make sense to him. Right? So imagine that you bought a house. According to him, he said he bought a house for about 40 million in 2021 and sold it a year later for about 46 million or so. Decent investment, isn't it? In 1 year, you're already making 6 million. And then, but when he converts it to dollar, because he actually sold dollar to Naira to buy the house. So when he now converted back to dollars, there was no difference. He didn't lose much, but he did lose. So he just looked at it like, what just happened? So he hasn't even factored in the stress of selling and all the wahala and of buying and selling. So the point is, the reason why we are in an exchange rate problem in Nigeria is we don't export a lot. And because we don't export a lot, we import more. There's just not enough dollar to go around. Everybody has a dollar expense, but a lot of us don't have dollar incomes. Then, the issue about inflation. So because inflation is up, most countries around the world have basically increased their interest rates. So when they increase their interest rates, in economics, what happens is that the dollar becomes a stronger currency. So the dollar starts to eat every other currency. So it's going to be like that this year. There was one glimmer of good news last week, which is that US inflation has dropped. So you guys when you see news and you see US inflation, pay attention to that information. It could just be the difference between you and your competition. Because if the world decides they want to reduce interest rates, then you could start to see weaker dollar, because the US actually wants a weaker dollar, because a weaker dollar means that they can export more and they make money. Their goods are more competitive and it favors us. So, but for now, that's not their policy. So the exchange rate is likely going to get worse this year. Mind you, we haven't even factored in the December inflation. Things are also going to get more expensive. They are going to reduce or remove fuel subsidy this year. It's going to happen. Electricity rates are likely going to go up again. So if all these things happen, inflation will go up. What do you think will happen to the exchange rate? Depreciate. So you also want to try as much as possible to keep a lot of your earnings in dollars. I'm not saying dollarize Nigeria, but try and keep some of your income in dollars or your investment in dollars. Also try and see how you can make some more income in dollars. It's difficult, but you have to, because that's the only way. If you have dollar expenses, you better try and find dollar income that can match it, or else you'll be kicked out of business. Because what will happen is that you'll be making money in Naira, you convert part of it to dollars to pay for your dollar expenses, then you keep suffering, your margins keep going down. Next slide. Next. So let's go to the next trend that I see. Next trend. Next. Yes. So interest rates is another interesting trend that we should watch out for this year. So interest rates is essentially how much you pay the banks when you borrow money. I can use myself as an example. There's a facility that I have with a bank. This time last year, my monthly payment was about 500,000. In fact, at some point it was like 480, 485, just sort of ranges within that, depending on the month. Do you know how much I pay now? As at December, I was paying 680,000. And they've told me now that from January, it's going to go to 700 or something thousand. So now I'm asking myself, why don't I just pay that loan off? I deliberately left it because I was making more investing the cash. So the loan was about 12, 13%, but I was investing at 20%. So it didn't make sense to pay off the loan. It was okay for me to keep the cash and invest. But now that the interest rate is going up, I'm now looking at my income. And I'm not just looking at my income from an interest income perspective. I'm looking at it from a dollarized perspective as well. Because you also have to, so when you're doing your math, don't do your math on Naira alone. Convert your investment to dollar. Ask yourself, what is the dollar return that you're getting on this investment? So if you are looking to borrow this year, please, interest rates will be high. I don't think it's a very good time to borrow at all. It's not a good time to borrow money now because interest rates are high. Even though on the flip side, during inflationary environment, borrowing can be good if your interest rate is low. So it's big companies that borrow. And if you notice last year, a lot of big companies borrowed last year. All of them, they did hundreds of billions of naira of bonds. They knew that things were going to happen like this. So they were smart enough to borrow quickly at an interest rate that they locked down. So for those of us overdrafts and things like that, I think you might want to cool down and avoid it, or else it will run you out of business. Next trend. Insecurity. I was reading news yesterday and I read about a priest or a father or so that was burnt alive. So insecurity has been with us now for some move past the slide, for some years now. And it usually picks up just as we approach election. And sometimes it happens right after election, and then it usually cools for a bit, then picks up again, depending on where all these agents that cause insecurity see the country going to. Maybe they start to wait and see the tone of the new leader and what he's trying to say. Then they now decide whether to continue or not. So you should be careful because there's going to be more insecurity this year. That's what we project. So who could it be? Could it be Boko Haram at some point? Or these days we don't even hear of Boko Haram anymore. It's now faceless people, unknown gunmen. They were just going to somewhere, scatter, carry people. Is it going to be Niger Delta guys that are going to come back this year if whoever is elected is not in their favor? You have to track those things. If it's the Niger Delta guys that come back, then that's even worse for exchange rate because then we can't export oil. And governments will make money. In fact, the one that happened in 2015-16 is what we're suffering. Why you're seeing all these loans that government is borrowing up and down, that people are saying, I'm sure you guys have been tracking it, that right now we now have so much debt that our children might not even be able to pay because of some of those things that happen. Because we've gone from producing 1.8 million barrels of oil to producing, at some point we're producing 900,000. Meanwhile, we should be producing 2.5. That's just about enough and be growing. So insecurity is likely going to continue. So also watch out for the kind of places that you're going to. But there's also an opportunity as well for those who are into security gadgets. So if you sell, people are going to be more cautious about cybersecurity. People are going to be more cautious about their own personal security. So people are going to buy a lot more of CCTV cameras and things like that. So those are business opportunities as well, because where there's insecurity, there's also opportunity. Bulletproof cars, you're going to see a lot of that. Even average guy too will be able to afford some of these things. So that's the trend that I see this year. I think there's going to be insecurity as well this year. Economic growth. So every economy grows, and you rely on growth in an economy to determine how well businesses or how well the economy will perform. So I don't know if you guys track what is called GDP. Are you aware of GDP? Nigeria's gross domestic product. It's a very important data that you should all track, because the GDP of a country determines whether foreign investors will come to that country. And if your business depends on foreign investment money, then you better pay attention to it. So if you go and read up reports from World Bank, IMF, they are all predicting low GDP growth rate for Nigeria. And that's because businesses are still struggling and inflation is high. But nevertheless, there are sectors that are doing very well. Can you move to the next slide? Let me see if I have those sectors here for you. No, go to the one before. Let me see if there are those sectors. Okay, it's not here. No, yeah, next one here. But there are sectors that are doing well. Anyway, I can give you some of those sectors. The telecom sector is doing pretty well. I expect that they'll continue to do well this year. So if you are looking for who to do business with, please target telecom people. They are going to do well this year. Trade as well. Traders are going to do well this year because the world is opening again. The world is going to fully open this year. So that means people who are doing import and exporter, they are going to make money this year. They are back. Real estate will likely also continue with how it was doing last year. Agriculture as well will likely do well this year. Power will likely do well as well. The reason why power will do well is that there's a lot of money going into that space, and that the power that is doing well is renewable. It's going to do well this year as well. So those are the areas in the economy that will likely grow. Oil and gas might struggle downstream. They will struggle a bit until they remove subsidy, then they will start to pick up again. But for now, the uncertainty will bog them down a lot. Manufacturing will also struggle a bit this year because of inflation. You see what manufacturers are doing now. Inflation is the reason why you go and buy a biscuit or milk. The sachet is like this, but the milk is here. The rest is air. It's because of inflation. That's why they're doing that. So they will struggle, and they're struggling because they're trying to keep margins. So the reason why you need to know these things too is you also need to follow the economy. So you know the kind of clients that will be owing you. It's true. Because you're wondering, why are these people not paying? It's because their GDP numbers will drop. We've said it already. So because I've also told you about inflation, you know that this guy is not going to be paying it on time. Oh. Two, there's inflation. So what do? You have to increase your invoice. The thing is that you'll be afraid of competition. Competition will go and quote lower. You quote, but they will die eventually. So don't compare yourself to competition. Just know that there are two things you're worried about. How do you get my money back? And when I get my money back, is it going to be whole? If it's not like that, there's no amount of competition that is worth it. Next slide, please. All right, so deals. Next slide. So this is next slide. I don't want to go into technical things. So deals is how people raise money. All these startups raise $1 million, $10 million, $4 million. I'm not sure you guys hear all those news. It will reduce a bit this year. But there are still some that will raise money. People in the fintech space will continue to raise money because fintech is expanding. And so what that means is that for you guys, all these startups that don't just think they are small companies. If you hear a startup is raising $3 million or $2 million, that's now 1.4 billion. It's not like before. That's billions. So that's money. And when they raise money, they have to spend it. They all have bond rates. Bond rate is, as incredible as it sounds, they're also measured by bond rate. Bond rate is how quickly are you spending the cash we give you. Because they relate that to growth. So if your bond rate is slow and you're not growing, they'll tell you you're not spending enough. That's why you're not growing. But if your bond rate is fast, but you're not growing, they tell you you're wasting money. What they expect is that if your bond rate is high, your growth is what? High. So you also have to look for those kind of companies as well. So this year, that's what's going to happen. So if you're a small business, remember I said don't borrow. Look for investments. And one area that we think that things are going to change this year is grants. There's going to be a lot of grants this year. Because see, the way the world works, when the West starts to put forward very draconian economic policies, they know that it has ripple effect on small countries and emerging markets like Africa. So what they now do in return is that they now start to pump in a lot of grants to help because they know it affects them. If small business in Nigeria start to collapse, what will happen is everybody wants to migrate. It creates a new problem for them. It starts to also fester terrorists and all. So they know those things. So what they typically do is that they send grants. So you need to figure out where are they sending the grants to. Like I told you, I mentioned some of the sectors. Renewables, for example, there's going to be a lot of grants along those lines. Financial inclusion, there's going to be a lot of grants along those lines. Technology, which we're going to get to very soon. So if you're looking for money this year, the trend is that there's going to be a lot of grants and then avoid debt. Okay? Next, keep going to the next trend. Next trend. This one is a big problem. Next trend. So the next government is going to be very, very, very harsh with tax. So these days, with these new Naira notes and e-Naira and all these policies you're seeing, it's not because Emefiele wants to shine or wants to look for someone's trouble. These things are all coordinated. There's a financial strategy document that they prepared some years ago that actually laid the framework for these things you're seeing. Excuse me. So what it means is, more than ever, the tax people can see everything that you do. That they haven't come to you is not because they don't have your information. It's just because there are too many people to go to. But at the same time, one thing one guy tells me is that the moment you start to go there, they know you. That's the funny thing about Nigeria, isn't it? Once you decide you want to be paying your tax now, you go and file it. They will now know that this guy, be like, say, get money. They will start coming after you. This country is just funny. Abi? But if you sit down and you don't pay, they will not look for you. They will now say you're not paying, informal, your tax evasion. The moment you go and start saying, I want to be paying, I want to be doing well, you'll be remit. That's when they will come and ask you, that your car, where did you get the money to buy it from? Have you paid tax on it? But the point is, it's good to pay tax, but let's be mindful that those are some things that are going to come after your money. It's important to also know the things that are going to come after your money this year. So try and pay attention to tax as well. By the way, any business that their revenue, your turnover is less than 25 million, you have no business with tax. Don't kill yourself. That was one of the policies that was good that it came out with last year. But if you're doing over 25 million turnover, you have to be mindful that they are going to come after you. And they see everything. They have access to your transactions. Right. Next slide. Let's go to the next trend. Next trend. This one, this year is going to be a year of technology. Have you guys heard of Chat GPT? That thing is a winch, as they say. So even me, I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of strategy, I do a lot of that. I started using it last week, and I use it almost every day. Just sweet. It just gives you structure. But that's what the world is going to be. What do you think it means for us? As sweet as it is, it's a threat, isn't it? It's a threat. A company can just decide, give me a brief for a brand, blah, 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 blah. Just give them the brief. Do this, do that, do that. They just hire one small guy. Go and flesh it up. What do I need this company for that used to do brand for me? I don't need them. So you have to ask yourself, what does this mean for my business? As well as it makes me more efficient, it also means that my clients also have access to that same thing. So what it then means is that quality was always going to be the differentiator. There will now be a need for a differentiator. Because gone are the days when a company asks you for a brief, you just go and dust up one of your old briefs and just rearrange it and send to them. They will just go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, please give me blah, 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 blah. It will just give them. They'll compare it to the one you gave them and they say, this one just meant to go and dump. But the world this year is going to be dominated by tech. AI is going to be mainstream. The metaverse, I don't think is gone as much as you had issues with cryptocurrency. It's going to be mainstream. So try and figure out what is happening in that space. Cryptocurrency is going to come back. It's not going anywhere. It's just taking a break. It's still going to come back once they sort out their issue because the technology is just too strong. And mind you, this year as well, 5G is going to be dominant this year. You know what 5G, the difference between 5G and 4G essentially is fast streaming. Fast streaming. So what it means is that with fast streaming, a lot of people will spend more time on what? On videos. I own a media website. I'm already seeing it. There's a lot less people reading articles. Yeah, people prefer visuals. You got to also follow your data because internet speed is faster, isn't it? 5 years ago, you used to see buffering. It was giving you 60%, 70%, 80%. Now, it's faster. And the reason why is this, cloud computing. Okay? So, cloud computing, Netflix has its servers in Nigeria, in case you don't know, in South Africa. So, when you want to stream a Netflix movie, I'm sure you wonder why it's always very fast. It's not calling the server in the US. It's calling the server within Africa. So you're going to see a lot of that. These are the sort of trends you're going to see throughout this year. All right? Next trend. I think my time is almost up, if not up already. So next trend. Let's see. 10 more minutes. All right. Next. So e-commerce. I also put up my trend for e-commerce. So I think a lot of people, we're now used to buying goods online. Do we agree? Do we agree? Are we used to? Yeah. But the offline business is still very huge. The other day I went to Epano. It looks like it was a carnival going on there. In fact, people go there to go and I just only realized that people go there to go and even show off their clothes these days. I will ask myself, is it not supermarket that you just wear joggers and slippers? Some people will dress nice and come there and you see them on the aisle. You think maybe they just dashed in to quickly buy something. But they are there, 1 hour, they are still shopping. So people will still buy things offline, but I think there's going to be a combination of online as well. A lot more people will go online to buy things. Because what would determine how people shop would also be cost. So as things start to get more expensive, people start to figure out new ways to reduce cost. And if it is online, then it's online. So what you see a lot of businesses doing now, even the likes of Amazon, is that they are offering a hybrid of online and offline. So you can order online quickly. By the time you get to the shop, to their supermarket, it's already waiting for you, and you pick up. Because time is also going to be very important. By the way, guys, time is going to be very important. Today when I was coming, I told my driver, where's your GPS? Oh, I said, I want the GPS, because you realize that there is now little time. Think about it. You only have 24 hours. You have emails. You have YouTube videos. You have books to read. You have films to watch. There's series. There's video from your mother that she has calling you. Have you seen it? Have you seen it? I've been sending it. There's church prayer message. There's so many things. So what time do you have? Even when you socialize these days, everybody's on their phones. So time is going to be of the essence, and technology is going to play a huge role in how we manage time. Do you understand? So leverage a lot on technology. It's very important that you leverage on technology this year. And I think e-commerce is going to have slightly good year. Might be tougher for them compared to COVID years, because COVID year was a boom for most of them. I think there's going to be a resource. So if you have e-commerce people that you're dealing with, I think you want to focus on. And there's going to be heated competition. People in digital media and digital, digital space, advertising and all that. Your best friend is competition. If you are in an industry where there's no competition, there's no point, there's no money to be made. But where there's competition, it means that people are battling for market. So people are looking for the best advertising techniques, the best way to push products. So this particular sector is going to be as competitive as ever in 2023. Next slide, please. I think we're almost done. Go on. All right, so jobs and career. I expect more. These days now, every year in January, you hear one bank have said that they are sacking 1,000 people. Did you hear it this year? Because the people have sacked themselves. So there's nobody to sack. So because the people have, you're now sacking the company. So it's reverse downsizing. That's what's going on. It's going to continue this year. We're now in an era of reverse downsizing. So expect more people to go. So if you're a business owner, how do you retain your talent? That should be your top objective. Understand now that people can work hybrid. You can have your talent work outside Nigeria, or you keep them here. Understand that they have 3 jobs. It's not, forget it. That's the trend now, because people are a lot more nomadic with their work. So what are you killing yourself for? Just make sure that you leverage on that thing I mentioned again, technology, and then ensure that you have a way of monitoring at least their own deliverable and tasks to you. So when you're going to give people work to do, give them tasks. Make sure that it's very clear. Because remember, you also don't have time to be monitoring. So when you give task, I want you to do A, B, C, D today, then when you come back, at least make sure that they've done that A, B, C, D. Because I tell you, they are having multiple things. And these days, everybody now we're now in a world where anybody wants to be his own boss. The person can be working for you in the day, in the night, is his own boss because maybe he's creating one content or has a business on Shopify that he's selling or has an online store somewhere that he's doing his own stuff. So you gotta understand that that's the world we are in today. The Gen Zs don't joke. They don't have time. Oh. So you have to know how you manage Gen Zs, and that will be the trend this year. A lot of them are going to look for different ways to survive. It's going to be harder for them this year, by the way, because of inflation. And because the world has now sort of reduced all the pressure around the money that's been going around. So they will face a little bit of slowdown. But they are bold and they are risk takers. They are not afraid to leave and look for something else. And if you guys notice during the week, you've been seeing issues around banks debiting this one account, money lows. It's all jackpot. A lot of companies, their technology backbone have left. So that's also a risk for all businesses. Understand that. Think about it now. If you had some guy who his job was to be designing nice graphics for you and he leaves, will you tell your client that you don't have a designer again? You'll still be designing now. So all of a sudden, the client just realized that it's not as nice as it used to be before. It's all because of jackpot. So that trend is going to continue this year. Go on. Sustainability, I don't want to get into that. That's just renewables and all that. Investing, go on. Now, so I just want to, this is the last slide. Go, next slide. All right. So these industries, I think I mentioned some already, are the industries to watch this year. Okay? Travel industry, I think is going to bounce back seriously this year. A lot of people who have not gone on vacation last 2 years for one reason or the other, all of them will go and enjoy this year. That's for sure. I'm too sure people will go and enjoy themselves this year. There's going to be a lot of internal traveling because people who can't afford to travel abroad will start to discover that Nigeria too is sweet. There are some very sweet places to go to Nigeria. It could even be within Lagos here, but expect travel to bounce back. I mentioned security, right? As much as security is a problem, it's an opportunity for security businesses. There's no house now that does not have CCTV. Am I lying? No estates. They all have. So that's going to be a major trend. I already mentioned telecoms, data and cloud computing. It's going to be huge. What did I just do when I gave you my file? It wasn't a link I gave you. That's cloud. I didn't have to email anything. I just give him a link and he downloaded it and that's it. If I wanted him not to be able to download that thing, I can do it as well. So also make sure that you use that in your organization so that you're nimble and you're more efficient with how you work. It's cloud computing. Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, they're all cloud computing. Apple Cloud, iCloud. They're all cloud computing technologies. How do you use them more efficiently? They are not just buzzwords. They are things for you to use in your business. How do you share files? How is it that two people, do you know that two people can collaborate on a file? The same way you have Google Sheets, Google Doc, Excel has that as well. All of them, you can collaborate on a file. We talked about ChatGPT. That's different things. Leverage on them to make your work a lot more efficient. It's going to be huge. I talked about power already. Logistics is going to continue to be huge because people need to deliver goods around the country despite all the problems. See the way they banned Okada and they turned into something else now. Now they are now a huge business on its own. You can't understand the billions that's going into this sector. People just don't have visibility there, but there's a lot of money going in here. I know somebody who works there and his job is to open hire new delivery bikes in every state. The kind of targets they give them, they can give them hire new in every state within 3 months. 1,000, like that. So this industry is going to keep booming. Insurance as well. I think, is going to be their year because if they don't survive this year, they will die. That's why you saw insurance companies decide to increase their rates. I don't know whether you guys saw that. So insurance business is going to be big this year. So I think you want to look at insurance as well. Then education. This is part of education. As people are jackbarring, what's going to happen? You need to fill the skill gap, isn't it? So I think people who are into education and vocational studies are going to make a lot of money this year as well. So maybe that's one area I want to. Maybe if you're somebody who you do a lot of content and people don't follow your content on YouTube, why don't you? Maybe, but you know you're good at doing that YouTube, then you can start teaching. So it's going to be huge, and of course, oil and gas upstream. See, I mentioned upstream because Nigeria needs to pump more oil. So upstream oil and gas companies are going to be good, and then of course trade. So this, ladies and gentlemen, are my trends for 2023. And I'm ready to take questions, if any. Thank you very much.
morning.
Thank you so much, Ugo. Oh, he's supposed to take questions now. Okay, we're going to take questions for the next 5 minutes before we go into the next session. I think you should take advantage of Ugo being here. His session is so instructive to what we're trying to achieve for the SMEs because it's not about you trying to sell and sell and sell without understanding what is going on around in your micro and macro environment. And I think he's the expert for that. So let's take one or two quick questions before we go into the next session. Thank you, Ugo.
Okay, good morning. Just this last slide here on opportunities. Were you referring to international trade?
All
When you
trades.
said-
That's why I said import and export. Yeah. And I think I put a lot of emphasis on export as well because there's a lot of policies that the government have put forward that's encouraging exports. People just don't know. There's a lot of opportunities there, even global as well. So with Russia and Ukraine fighting, there's demand for all sorts of commodity exports. And so if you know businesses that are in that line, I think you want to track them as well. Then import is that we need cheaper goods. And usually when there's inflation, remember that's why I started with inflation. When there is inflation, governments always have a rethink. So over the last few years, the policy of the government has focused largely on made in Nigerian goods. But when things are very expensive and people start to groan, you start to hear calls for imports. Because when you import, what tends to happen is that their goods are usually cheaper than your local goods. Because at the end of the day, people just have to survive. It's just common sense. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not working.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, is it? Okay. What's your projection for the exchange rate when the new government comes in?
Yeah.
That's one. And then two, do you want to share with us what are the opportunities that are available to us to earn foreign exchange?
All right, interesting question. So for me, I think that ultimately, before 2021 and 2022, the exchange rate has always depreciated by roughly 4 or 5% annually. So it would always depreciate over the long term. And it's not like depreciation is a bad thing. It's a good thing if you're exporting, right? If you earn money in dollars, in fact, you want it to keep depreciating because when you come back to Naira, you just have a lot of money on you. But the reason why it's a problem is that we earn mostly in Naira and we mostly import things. So for me, I think that the exchange rate could go to could fall to as much as 1,000 if the CBN does most of what it did last year, which is just come up with policies that jolt the markets. If you notice, most of the times when the thing just started galloping, it was because of some news that just came up that sort of forces people, to want to just quickly move all their money to dollars. But if that doesn't happen, I think we'd stabilize. Oscillate between 700, 800, max 850. That's my own outlook for exchange rate for this year. So a 10% depreciation could be as much as 800 or so. Last year we did 25 or so, 26% depreciation. So I don't think we'll do that this year as well. But again, it also depends on who's coming in as well. Remember what I said. Once you start to hear them say things that you're like, are these people okay? Just know that Wala is about to set. Now, in terms of dollar earnings, there are a lot. But for a small business, I think the sort of earnings that you would have to make would be businesses that have a global footprint. So businesses that are not walled to Nigeria. So it could be maybe your intellectual property. I think that kind of business, anyone can need it outside the country. And then businesses as well that allow people sell on your platform. So it could even be maybe you own a platform and then your business is advertising. So advertising means that you earn foreign revenue. And then if you have a lot more skill, then you can do export, right? I think export, if you have skill for export, there are people now who I know that are going into things like exporting mineral resources, gold. Some are even exporting agricultural products without actually being farmers. So what they do is that they fund the value chain. But the problem with those kind of businesses is trust. So you have to very well trust that whole process because from getting things from the farm and moving them to the port and exporting it is a whole lot of risk. But the returns are mad, and it's usually in dollars. So those kind of businesses work. But if you're not into that kind of legwork, then it's intellectual property you're probably exporting, right? I know a lot of guys who are also into the creative sector, maybe movie makers. These days, apart from when they make movies now, they know that there's also a global market out there to consume their content, right? So they also structure it in a way that once they serve to the Nigerian market and they're fine, they now start to export and put it on several other platforms abroad. Because right now, the world is so small with technology that your market can't just be Nigeria. And that way you tend to earn. If you notice, a lot of our artists, do you see them here? They're hardly in Nigeria. They make most of their money outside. And that's the fact. They make most of their money outside. Now, they've also plugged into a lot of networks that allow them have circuits. So you see them, they're playing from one country to the other. So I think that's how we've got to also approach our businesses. So I'm also looking at my own businesses like that. How do you not just think of catering for the Nigerian market? So there's a Nigerian market, there's a diaspora Nigerian market, which earn dollars, and then there's the African market who likes Nigeria or who like Nigerian products, right? And then there's, of course, the international market. So you have to segment your businesses in that way and find out how you attract these people. You might not attract all of them, but find out what your niche is and then start to earn that dollar. And give yourself small targets. It could be $500, $1,000 a month, and on and on and on. And I think that helps you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.